Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Wow,
Thanks for
thanks.
joining us. Yeah, okay, I'll explain. So we had some technical issues. So thanks for your patience. Hopefully everything's okay now. Today we have Jiaxing from Developer Space and Laifeng from WomenTechmakers Kuala Lumpur, and two of our speakers, Mashal and Wajahat. Thanks for joining us today. Our other speaker is going to use a different setup. So maybe, yeah, over to you, Jiaxing.
Yep, thanks everyone for joining us on Saturday and waiting for a couple of minutes. Great to see all of you here. Yeah, we are really excited for today's session. IO Extended KL. Let us know if you are tuning in from Malaysia or like our speakers, you are from outside of Malaysia. Yeah, the good thing about virtual events is that everyone can join us as long as you have an internet connection. Yep, and we are super excited for today's session. Just wanted to briefly share about Google Developer Space with all of you who may not be familiar. So we actually have a physical space in the Google Singapore office, but due to COVID, I think everyone here feels the same way. We all miss physical events. But yeah, so for now, we brought everything online, and that's how we started our YouTube channel and Facebook. So yeah, do follow us there. We host a lot of events online with developers and startup communities. So yeah, I think everyone is really excited for the talks. So I won't take up more of your time. Over to you, Eric and Laifeng, to introduce today's session.
All right. So our first session will be with Sakina Abbas, who is a Flutter GDE, and she'll be talking about rapid prototyping with Flutter and Firebase. For everyone, if you have questions, please do ask in the chat, and then I will be compiling all of them, and I'll be making it available to the speaker during Q&A after the talk. All right, Jiaxing? All right, so yeah, Sakina? Sorry, Jiaxing, you're muted.
Yeah, give me a while. Let me figure out what's going on.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Thanks for your patience, speakers, audiences. So yeah.
Yep, I'm here. Okay, awesome. Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Sakina, and today we're going to talk about everything regarding rapid prototyping with Flutter and Firebase. So before we just get right into it, let me give you a quick introduction. So my name is Sakina Abbas. I am the co-founder and CEO of Reactree, along with being a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart. I initially started off as a native Android developer, but eventually transitioned into Flutter development, and which is what I'm doing currently. So I'm leading DevOps and Flutter at my company Reactree. I'm also a core member of Flutter Karachi, Pakistan, as well as a Women in Tech speaker for Google Developer Space Singapore. So before we actually really start to talk about rapid prototyping, let me ask you what you really do. What's the first thing that you do when you come up with this great idea that you think is going to be literally a money-making machine for you? So I mean, of course, you carry out your own research and everything to validate your idea. But what is the first thing that you do? You prototype it to test your concept. Now, when it comes to prototyping, there are multiple facets that you need to consider, which can really make your application a hit or a miss. So let's categorize it in terms of what the users might expect from your end product and what you as an owner want from your end product. So obviously your users care about the overall user experience, the user interface of it. It should work seamlessly, it should work flawlessly, smoothly. The features that you're providing as part of your prototype or application are obviously of key importance. And then there's security, there's scalable, like if you actually end up creating a full-fledged product out of this prototype, then at some point in time, you have to look at the scalability of it as well. So if you're getting a lot of users, you want your system to scale with it, right? But the most important of it is timing. You don't want to be too late into the market. I mean, you have just conceived your idea, you're really excited about it, and you want a very quick way to validate your idea with your test audience, perhaps, or with a couple of people very close to you, so that you can progress forward, right? Now, as an owner, what do you want from this prototype? There are obviously multiple metrics that you want to monitor, like how well your application is performing, which screen or which page the user is interacting with the most, and so on and so forth. But again, the most important aspect, even for you as an owner, is timing. You don't want to be late to the market. So this is where Flutter and Firebase come in. Flutter and Firebase, when you use them together in order to prototype your products, it's a really smooth experience. It's a really fast experience. And how is it so? Let's look into it. So what actually is Flutter? Flutter is an open source SDK developed by Google, and it is used to build cross-platform applications. So you essentially write just a single code base, and from that single code base, you're able to get applications for multiple platforms, not just specific to mobile, but also others. So we're looking at Android, we're looking at iOS, Windows, macOS, Linux, Fuchsia, web, and so on and so forth. And now we're even moving in towards embedded systems for vehicles, right? So the programming language that you use in order to create an application in Flutter is Dart. And it's been about 4 years now since Flutter has come in, and recently Flutter has really picked up on its popularity because it is literally one framework to rule them all. If you were to just Google about Flutter, these are some of the first few links that might populate your search results. And some of the keywords or key phrases that might catch your attention are build native interfaces in minutes, or build really beautiful native apps in record time. Now, as someone who's not really familiar with Flutter, someone who has just heard about Flutter and they're just starting with it, maybe you're someone who's coming from a native background, you've been coding in native Android or native iOS. For someone like you, or for someone like that person, you might think that this is a hoax. I mean, this is clickbait. How's that even possible that you can create such beautiful native interfaces, and that too in minutes? I mean, that's purely clickbait, right? But as you start to code along, as you start to learn about Flutter and just coding it up yourself, you will notice that it was actually not clickbait, and it's pretty much the real thing. So on the screen, I have a couple of applications shared, the ones that I made. So the first one is a music application that I coded as part of a live session sometime last year. So it's not just the UI, the functionality was also integrated. Okay, so you could play from a file, you could pause it, you could stop it, you could seek from it by dragging on the seek bar, and so on and so forth, right? And how long did it take me to code this entire thing? Obviously, because sessions are usually 40 minutes long, it literally took me 40 minutes to code this first application, which you can see on the very left. Then the one in the center is a game that I coded just the night before that I had a session. And this took me about 1.5 to 2 hours to code this entire thing with all of the collision detections, points, and everything. Okay, so yeah, that's how fast it took me. And then the last one that you see is a chatbot that I built using Flutter and Dialogflow. And again, this was part of some live coding session. And this took me 20 minutes, right? So the essence of sharing these applications with you guys is that whatever idea that you have, whether it's for a product, whether it's for a game that you want to develop, you can do that very easily and very quickly with Flutter. And how can you do that with Flutter? Let's look into it. So the first thing that you might hear about Flutter when you're just watching a tech talk or something, it's that Flutter is a UI toolkit, okay? I would disagree. I mean, it's not just specifically for designing the UI, although the UI part is really, I mean, it is something about Flutter that's really speedy, okay? So Flutter comes with a lot of pre-built widgets. If we just talk about a button, then we have multiple different types of buttons. We have text buttons, we have elevated buttons, and so on and so forth. And obviously, with Flutter 2.0, we have even more types of buttons with even more flexibility to the developer. So if we just look at this button over here, you can style it however you want to. You want to provide it a gradient, you can do that with barely 2 to 3 lines of code. You want to give it a very nice shape. Maybe it's rounded on 3 corners, but not so rounded on the 4th corner. I know, bad UX, but I'm just saying, right? You can do that very easily using, again, 1 to 2 lines of code. So the bottom line is that there are a lot of pre-built widgets that you essentially consume the way that you might call a constructor for any object, and you pass it your own choice of attributes with your own choice of configuration so that you can get the desired outcome, okay? So they're very flexible, they're very customizable, and obviously there are some things, there are some widgets that you want to use in your application, but Flutter does not have, like, it doesn't have that primitive support for that, right? So what can you do over here? You can obviously create your own widgets, or you could head over to pub.dev, where there are so many plugins which are so creative and so beautiful, and you can just look at their documentation and just plug and play in your application. It's as simple as that. So so this is one thing that's really speedy. And if I were to compare this with creating widgets, which is, just by the way, a widget is nothing but a UI element. So a text is a widget, a button is a widget, and so on and so forth. If I were to compare this with native Android, let's say, and I'm talking about the days where we would code in XML and Java. I'm not talking about Jetpack Compose right now or Kotlin right now. So what you had to do was that just to create a normal button, you had to create a separate XML file for its style. You had to create a separate file for the layout, and then you would actually be coding in a Java file where you would reference all of those UI elements there. So it would get really complicated just for a very small, simple task. In Flutter, it's all inline. It's all a simple widget tree, a widget hierarchy, and it's just very simple to code. The other thing that's really good about Flutter is that if, let's say, you have created an application with a lot of screens, and obviously each screen has really large widget trees, obviously, because there are lots of UI components structured, right? And you're just using your application, and you come across this specific part of your application that you want to inspect because you're not happy with the padding, maybe you're not happy with the styling, or perhaps there's a button against which you have coded some functionality, but you can't find that functionality in your project because it's gotten too huge. So the way that Flutter makes it easy is Flutter Inspector. So in your dev tools, there's this there's this option to inspect your widgets. And when you enable that, you can just click on your emulator or on your device that specific widget that you would like to inspect, either for its UI elements or for the functionality that you've associated with it. You just click on it, and your ID will redirect you to the exact spot where that widget is called and where that widget is basically configured. So you don't have to browse through files and directories just looking like, oh, okay, where is it? And you don't have to hit up Control+F and yada yada, right? Now, you might have a question that, hey, so Flutter is a technology which supports cross-platform application development, right? So the way that it works is that whatever code that you write in Flutter, it's compiled into the native code, and that's how you get the platform-specific binary or executable, right? So for this, you might have a question like, hey, native platforms usually have native support for really, really important or complicated functionality, right? So for instance, if we're talking about a camera application, you would obviously need to interact with the native libraries of the device, right? So how is that possible in Flutter? Like, how do you manage that? So the way that you go about it is with platform channels. So platform channels is kind of like a layer that allows you to invoke native code from Flutter code. So let's say that you're someone who doesn't know much about native programming. Like I know about native Android, but I don't know about native iOS, right? So if there's some functionality that for which I really need that deep native support, what I will do is I will just write chunks of native code in my iOS or Android or whatever platform that I'm developing for. And I will just invoke that using the platform channels in Flutter. So it's quite convenient even for someone who's not familiar with native coding, and they can still leverage platform channels and make use of those features that are heavily dependent on native support. And obviously, we have ID shortcuts, which make Flutter development even faster. So let's talk about Firebase. Now, so you've learned Flutter, okay, and you've coded this really minimal yet aesthetically pleasing application, which is just really fun to use, okay? But obviously, your applications need to be connected with a backend source in order to operate perfectly well, right? This is where Firebase comes in. Firebase provides you this suite of tools and features that you can leverage in order to create your prototype without having to think too much about architecting your back end or other services that you want to integrate, right? So at the moment that you open up Firebase on your system and you create your first project, on the left side, you see all of these multiple options appear on the left side, okay? So just by the look of it, you can see that, okay, so there are certain services that I can use during my development phase. There are certain services that I can utilize after I have released my application and I just want to monitor it for performance, analytics, or perhaps crashes. Then obviously there's this huge panel for analytics, which you can configure as per your own requirements, so that they're giving you the information that you need from the usage of your application that you've released. Okay. And then we have this huge panel for engagement. So we have, for instance, cloud messaging. So cloud messaging is basically notifications. If you want to interact or if you want to engage with your customers, you can use push notifications to give them constant reminders so that they're constantly engaged with your product, right? Now, Firebase per se offers a lot of tools, a lot of services, but obviously we won't be looking into all of them. And as a product owner, as a startup owner, or as someone who just wants to create a minimal prototype just to validate their idea, you don't really have to use all of these services. Okay, so these are just some of those that you can use, and some of those that I have actually used, and they're not even that time consuming to use. Okay, so we have authentication, which allows you to sign up or log into your application. Then we have two types of databases. One is the Cloud Firestore, one is the real-time database. Then we have storage. So let's say that the user or the customer is uploading media. So let's say if we take the example of WhatsApp, then when you're chatting with someone, you're obviously sending them images or GIFs or whatsoever, right? So this kind of media you can store in storage, and that's how, and then you can later on fetch it from storage and render it accordingly. Then there's cloud functions, which is again a really interesting concept, which I will be talking about later on. And then there's Crashlytics, cloud messaging, and everything, which we'll be briefly discussing later on right now. If we talk about authentication, so one of the things that I really absolutely love about Firebase is its authentication. It provides not just the vanilla email password authentication, but also Google login, Facebook login, Twitter, GitHub, anonymous, and even phone verification, right? And the best part is that if you are allowing your user to log in via Google, then, and let's say you want to collect their data, or you want to verify that the user is a legit user and not just some bot, then you can also pair their identity provider with a third-party identity provider. So let's say if I'm logged in via a Google account, I can still verify my phone number, and you as the developer can actually pair these two credentials together, okay? And the way that you do this is literally it's done in about 2 lines of code and 1 line of code without any formatting of the code, okay? So that's how simple it is. It's not that difficult at all. Now, when we talk about the databases, we have 2 types of databases, as I mentioned. So we have Cloud Firestore and the real-time database. The way that they're both structured is that they're both NoSQL databases. So that means that you don't really have to worry about how you are structuring your database. And let's say if we're talking about the vanilla SQL database, then for that, we need to have a proper structure and proper schema and everything, right? In Firestore or in the real-time database, if you're, let's say you're adding a record to a specific collection that doesn't exist yet, then it will create it for you. You don't have to worry about first creating that collection and then creating those attributes, creating that entire schema. No, it's just on the go. Okay, so that's really flexible. You don't really need dedicated backend engineers for this. If you have minimal knowledge of databases, of how you can structure your data, then it's quite convenient. So I won't be going into the very details of the 2 types of databases, but the key difference is that Firestore provides more flexibility in terms of querying, whereas real-time database is more suited for real-time applications, okay? And why is this difference there? It's because of the way that the 2 are structured. So the real-time database, the data is stored in one large JSON tree. So there is one large JSON tree, and then nesting. It's just like pure JSON, right? But when we talk about Firestore, we have collections, and each collection has multiple documents. And then the document over here, as you can see, has fields. So if I were to translate all of this in normal SQL terminology, then the collection is nothing but a table, a document is nothing but a row, and the attributes are nothing but columns, okay? So we can have multiple collections. So let's say we have a collection for users, we have a collection for posts, we have a collection for notifications perhaps, we have yada, 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 okay? And if we're talking about a collection for users, then each document would correspond to one single user, where each document will have the user ID, the user name, the user email, and other attributes that you're willing to store. The real-time database, on the other hand, as you can see over here, it's purely JSON, which I'm pretty sure that all of you are aware of it. And again, just a reminder, it's better to use real-time database only when you are working on an application that's purely real-time, even though Cloud Firestore supports real-time as well. So you can, it's up to you, whatever is feasible for you, whatever works for you. It's just that the real-time database came in before, like it was there from the beginning, and then Cloud Firestore came in like a couple of years ago. So it came in after the real-time database, okay? Next up, we have the Firebase Cloud Messaging, which is push notifications. So these are, if you want to send real-time notifications to your users in order to engage with them, you can easily do that using FCM. So it really drives the user engagement and user retention. You can either send normal notifications, which are purely text-based, or you can even send your own payloads, which you can do so for up to 4 KB. And you can even send in images in your push notifications. So as you can see on this example that I have on the right, so Webtoon it's a very popular application which can be which are basically it's for web comics, right? So as you can see, this is an example of a push notification, and it has this nice image over here. So obviously there are certain constraints that the image should not exceed these much dimensions, obviously, which I think you can pretty much find on any documentation on the internet, but you can do all of that. And if you want to, let's say, if I'm clicking on this specific notification, what is my intended behavior? I want that when I'm clicking on this notification, the exact screen with this webcomic loaded is opening up. So I'm not being redirected to the home screen or anywhere else. I'm in fact being redirected to the screen where this webtoon is present, so that I can just start reading from there, right? You can do that. You can control notification clicks, and you can even monitor notification click events. So if you've dispatched a notification and you want to see how many people opened it, you can actually check that on the Firebase console. Cloud functions are functions that are triggered by an event. So they're serverless, right? They're not being executed on the client side or anywhere. They're being executed in the cloud. So let's suppose that we have two interfaces. We have a customer application and we have a vendor application. So let's say that a customer places an order for this specific vendor, and we want to notify the vendor that, hey, you have a new order on your application. Please open it and review it and accept it, right? So we'll create a cloud function for this, and the way that it's going to work is, so you can set multiple facets for which it can be triggered. Like, do you want this cloud notification to be triggered on, let's say, on the creation of a specific document? Perhaps you want it to be triggered on the update of a specific document. So let's say that the vendor has accepted your order, then the customer wants to be notified, right? So these are specific metrics that you can define, and these are just specific things that you can use together in order to code your own cloud function, right? So cloud function, again, it's not just specifically for triggering notifications. If you're working with a payment gateway, so let's say if you're working with Stripe, so for security purposes, you can actually create a REST API using cloud functions that you can use on the client side. Or if let's say that you're creating an order with a specific status and you want the order status to be updated only when the payment has been made successfully, then you can do so with cloud functions. So they're really powerful and just something definitely worth looking into. Then there's Crashlytics. So Crashlytics is something that if your application is crashing and you just want to monitor that, it's like you want to look at the logs for all of that, you can do so using Crashlytics on Firebase console. So a good example over here, I would tell you from my personal experience, which is, so when I was initially working with native Android, okay, that was the time when Flutter had not even come out. So the system that I was working on, all of the USB ports were fried, okay? And obviously, fried USB ports meant that I couldn't connect the USB cable with my physical device and debug the issue. And the emulator did not, and basically it was the application was of the nature that I could not test it on the emulator because it was something to do with real-time locations and real-time location updates, right? So the application was up and running. It was with our client, and the application was crashing for some reason, and I just didn't know what to do. And of course, I tried wireless debugging as well, but obviously for wireless debugging, you need to connect your device via the USB cable, at least for the first time that you're setting it up, right? So when all of these options had failed, I looked into Crashlytics, and lo and behold, it provided me a neat logs of all the crashes, along with very important information that I needed, such as the device that the person was using, the operating system version that the device had, and which screen were they on when the application crashed, which line of code was being executed when this application crashed. So it's something that's really useful and really comes in handy for when you've shipped your product, okay? Then kind of like the last thing, but definitely not the least, analytics. Once you have shipped your product, you want to monitor multiple aspects. So like, where are most of the users coming from? If it's a cross-platform application, are they coming from Android? Are they coming from iOS? Which regions are they coming from? Which screen or which button or which part of your application are they interacting with the most? And so on and so forth. You can do that easily with analytics. And guess what? You don't really have to do much. You just have to write a single line of code in your application, in your Flutter application. You just have to add that as a dependency, and that's it. Analytics will start working. By default, Firebase already provides you some reports or some metrics for you to monitor, but obviously you can customize it as per your requirements, however you want to. Now, the bottom line is this that you might be asking, so is it too code intensive? And the good news is no. Everything that we've spoken about Flutter and Firebase right now, it's actually not really code intensive at all. It's pretty simple and it's pretty fast, and the learning curve is not even as steep. It's quite all simple. So what kind of applications can you build with Flutter and Firebase? Basically anything. The sky's your limit, from e-commerce applications to productivity apps to music players to games, chatbots, IoT, whatever you imagine. Literally, the sky's the limit. You can pretty much build anything that you want with Flutter and Firebase. So after giving you this entire background on how Flutter works, on how Firebase works, how do you actually build your app with the two? So Flutter Fire is the official umbrella library for Firebase for Flutter that you can look up on the internet. And the best part about Flutter Fire is that everything is documented so properly that you don't really even have to navigate away from this documentation until and unless you run into some problems and you want to troubleshoot it, right? So from the process of integrating a specific dependency from the entire Flutter Fire library towards integrating that code, towards defining multiple use cases for multiple platforms, it's quite friendly and it's quite easy to understand. So the way that it works in Flutter is that there's this file called pubspec.yaml where you include all of your dependencies. So dependencies are basically libraries that you would like to use in your Flutter application. So as you can see over here as a sample, we have a couple of dependencies added, such as Firebase Core, Auth, auth for authentication. Then we have Firestore, storage, messaging for push notifications and cloud messaging. Then we have analytics, the Facebook login, Google sign-in, and so on and so forth, right? So the bottom line is that why should you prototype using Flutter, or why should you prototype using Firebase? Again, they're both fairly simple and easy to learn and understand. They're very quick to implement. I will be showing you a working application along with its small chunks of code, not everything in depth, obviously, due to shortage of time, but just to give you a preview of like, hey, if we're coding something like of this nature, then how are we doing it, and so on and so forth. So it's quite relatively easy. They're both performant by default, and Firebase is scalable per se, until and unless you have coded your architecture or you have coded your database queries in a way that even Firebase is like, I'm so sorry, but I cannot scale beyond this point if you aren't following proper coding practices. They're both developer friendly, and Flutter is performant, it's highly customizable. And the best part about Firebase, I would say, is that it's quite powerful. So as we saw, there are a huge bunch of tools that Firebase comes with. So if your prototype is something that's perhaps it's something of an e-commerce store, or if it's something about a game, right? So obviously there are multiple facets involved to it, and you don't really need to involve people from multiple backgrounds in order to help you develop your prototype. Okay, so from messaging, from cloud functions to triggers, to databases, to storage, pretty much everything, you can do it on your own or with your small team that you have. You don't really need to interact with lots of resources, and you don't have to spend a lot of time planning on the overall architecture, on what services or which services are you going to use and from where, because Firebase is like a one-stop solution for literally everything. Okay, so I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen and then reshare my screen so that I can show you a working application along with a very minimal code. So just a sec. Okay, so as you can see over here, I have this application up and running. Let me just increase the font size. Okay, so as you can see, I have this application up and running over here. The essence of this application is that you can create a write-up, and that write-up will be available and accessible anywhere and everywhere. Okay, I have implemented basic login mechanism for anonymous login. So let me just hit logout and show it to you from the very start. So as you can see, this is the application. And if I were to show you the UI for this specific file, now let's say, as you can see, I have multiple files over here, right? Won't be going into all of them. So let's use the widget inspector that we spoke of, right? So as you can see, I have Flutter Inspector over here. I click on widget inspector. And then let's say I want to look at this, like, hey, what is this continue as guest button? And as you can see, it redirected me to the exact specific spot where I have used this code. Now, as you can see, I have this over here on the right. This is actually my widget tree. So it's very easy to find the hierarchy of widgets if you're working with a really complicated application. So over here, let's see. I have material button over here. And as you can see on pressed, I have used anonymous authentication, right? So you can sign in anonymously. And then over here, I've used that once the user has signed in anonymously, then we are printing their user ID, and we're also checking if the the authentication provider that was used is anonymous for this, and if it is, you should just print it, okay? So this is literally the only line of code that you need in order to authenticate your user anonymously. So it's kind of like a guest login. You know how certain applications provide you a guest login functionalities? This is basically it, just 3 lines of code, and the dependency is already there in pubspec.yaml. So let me just click on this again, and let me clear my logs so that you can see, okay? So I hit on continue as guest, and as you can see over here, it has printed my UID, and it has also printed true, like, hey, yeah, this indeed, the user has indeed logged in anonymously. Now over here, there are a couple of posts that you can see, obviously because I have created them before. But let me introduce a new post over here. So like, hey, Google I/O extended Kuala Lumpur. Hi, there is Flutter and Firebase rapid prototype. Okay, so let's hit submit. And as you can see, it's appearing over here right away. Let me just quickly show you the code for doing that. So as you can see, all right. So this is basically the code where we have where we're fetching all of our write-ups from the database. And as you can see, we're just referencing to our collection write-ups, and we're ordering them by date created. So the latest posts that are created are being shown first. And we're basically returning a stream of it. So there's this concept of futures and streams in Flutter and Firebase. Stream basically takes care of any real-time changes. So if I were to change the content of this from Firebase console right now, you will be able to see the changes being reflected here in real time. Future, however, it executes just once, and that's it, until and unless you exit that screen and then reopen that screen, okay? So if you've used Twitter, then you know that on Twitter, whenever somebody has posted a tweet, then when people are liking that tweet or when people are retweeting that tweet, then the count is increasing there and then right on your screen, okay? So that's being done using a stream, okay? That's where it's used. Now, because again, I don't remember where I have coded this entire thing, let me show you where all of this is coming from. So as you can see, I have this stream builder in my home screen, which has a scaffold. Then we have this app bar that says pen pal. Then we have a floating action button, which is over here, and it's routing us to the new write-up screen, which had that form that we were filling in order to post it. And then in the body, we have a stream builder where we've just called our query. And then in the builder, we're just rendering a staggered grid view with each of the item containing the content which is coming from the database, right? So that's pretty much it. I know it was a very brief overview, but it was just something that I think would have been super useful for you if you want to prototype your idea in a very short time and by using as few resources as possible. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna check that the sound is all good. Yep, I think we have a lot of questions on YouTube, but due to time constraints, I think we are able to answer only one. But if you are tuning in, feel free to leave your questions there. Sakina will be able to answer them. We do want to go through one question by Yogan. So he asked, question on Flutter and Firebase. For rapid prototyping, do you compromise on testing, or testing is a must? And how can I create Firebase mocks for unit and integration testing?
Okay, so I haven't really worked with testing in as much depth or in as much detail as of now. But yeah, if you definitely want to test your app after creating it, after developing everything, then you can definitely do multiple different types of testing in Flutter. You can do unit testing, you can do widget testing, and there are other multiple types of testing that you can do. So yeah, I think you can definitely look into that or into the documentation in order to get a deeper sense into how you can do that. The good thing about Flutter though is that you can write your tests there and then. And even if you're someone who's not from an SQA background, which is me, I'm not coming from a testing background, I'm more of a developer. But even when you're just a normal Flutter developer and you're just working with multiple Firebase services, you can easily test your application by writing different types of tests, which test your database calls, which test your widgets, which test the state management of your overall application. You can easily do that by writing your own custom tests, which again vary from requirement to requirement, like what do you even want to test. So you can actually do that very fairly easily by doing that. And the documentation by Flutter's official team is really spot on when it comes to testing. So yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yep, Yogan, we hope that answers your question. I think now we are going to hand over to the second speaker. Thanks a lot, Sakina. Do head over to the YouTube chat to answer all of their questions.
Sure thing. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Sakina. So for our next speaker, it will be Mashal. And Mashal will be talking about navigation component. And she's a software engineer from Gudang Ada. Hi, Mashal.
Hello. Let me share my screen, please. Let me know when it's visible.
Right. Okay. So as usual, if you have questions, please do post in the chat, and we'll try to get to it at the end of the session. Yep. So Mashal.
Sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
It's 1 second. Stop sharing for me.
Right. Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Anyway, hello everyone. I'm Mashal Riaz, and I'm an Android developer at Gudang Ada. Today we're going to be exploring Android navigation component. So when we talk about navigation, we mean moving from one screen to another. Before navigation component was released, this was handled manually by the developer, either through intents in case of activities or through fragment transactions for fragments. We had to write the code to handle the UI event, for instance, like a button click, and then write the code to launch the navigation. This would create a lot of inconsistencies within the application because the developer had to manually handle the back button of the device as well as the up button of the action bar, which would make things a bit messy. But navigation component automates all of this for us. We don't need to handle toolbar navigation ourselves anymore. We just identify the destinations within the app, then the action that would take us from one destination to another, and then simply add the code that connects the user interaction with the navigation. We're going to talk about how this code works in the later part of the session, where you can see how compact or concise this code is. So talking about navigation component, it's basically a collection of libraries, tooling, and plugin that simplifies Android navigation for us. It basically provides a map for all the navigation present in the app, highlighting the destination or the screens, as well as the actions that take us from one destination to another. It also handles backstack for us, which means when we move from one screen to another, we don't have to worry about the previous one. Nav Component automatically handles that for us. It also provides us with the flexibility to pop some fragments when we navigate from one screen to another. For instance, let's say you're on login screen and you move to home screen once you log in, you'd probably want to pop login fragment out of the hierarchy of the fragments. Nav Component provides a very easy and a very streamlined way to achieve that behavior. It also automates fragment transactions, We just need to highlight the fragment we want to navigate from and the destination that we want to go to in the nav graph, and then call the action in our code. It also handles fragment transitions. That is, when we move from one fragment to another, it sort of lets you identify the transition you want, and so that the transaction doesn't seem abrupt. The process to achieve that is very simple and streamlined. Then we also have type safe argument passing. We can very easily send data or arguments from one fragment to another, and Nav component provides us with the types with like a type safe way. That is, the destination fragment knows what sort of data to expect. This is something we'll talk about in the later part of the session. It also allows us to, it also simplifies deep linking, which is being able to access a deeper part of the application from outside, which is also, again, we'll be discussing in this session. And lastly, it centralizes and visualizes all the navigation-related information present in the application. So the next we have the type of views that are supported by Nav component. It works out of the box for activities, for fragments, but we can also extend the library to work with our custom implementations, such as custom views. Up until very recently, I was also using intents to launch activities because I wasn't aware that Nav component supports them. So this is also something interesting for me, and I'm going to be exploring this also. Talking about the three parts of navigation component that work together in harmony to achieve navigation. It's important to sort of understand how all of these work together to make navigation actually happen. So the three parts that we have are navigation graph, NavHost Fragment, and NavController. This can be a little confusing because all of them contain the word nav, and some of them even existed way before navigation even, like navigation component even came into existence. Starting with navigation graph. It's basically an XML file that contains both a design view and an editor, just like most of the XML files we have in Android. It centralizes all the navigation related information and basically provides a map of your application. You can add a bunch of fragments or activities in the graph, nav graph. Then these destinations are actually called destinations, which means they are places you can navigate to and from. And the arrows over here present in the nav graph are called actions, which display the path that a user can take to navigate from one screen to another. The action lets you define stuff like arguments that you can pass while navigating. The action is what you trigger to sort of make the navigation actually happen. So as you can see in this graph, we have two fragments. One is product listing fragment and the other is product detail fragment. We can see that the product detail fragment is expecting an argument of type integer, and the argument name is product ID. And product listing fragment has an action that navigates it to product detail fragment. The next component that we have is NavHost Fragment. The NavHost Fragment is a container for fragments. It's basically an area or host within the layout for self-contained navigation to occur, which in a way we're saying that, hey, this is the empty space in which we want to show or display the fragments. It's basically a holder that swaps in and out destinations included in the nav graph. When you navigate from one destination to another, Nav controller sort of swaps in and out the destination. Here, it's important to note that the nav graph attribute present in the nav host fragment. Sorry, all of these are really because the terms are similar, so they're very confusing. Anyway, the nav graph attribute in the nav host fragment links the nav host fragment with its respective navigation graph. Sorry. The default nav host fragment to attributes ensures that the system back button is intercepted properly. Then we have a nav controller. This is what does most of the work behind the scenes. It contains the logic we need to swap destinations in and out of the nav host fragment. Each NavHost fragment has a nav controller that we use in our code. And this is what makes navigation actually happen. When we write this code, we're basically pointing towards the action and instructing the nav controller to swap the current fragment with the one mentioned in the action. That is pretty much about the navigation component itself. Now let's talk about when we navigate from one destination to another, we probably want to pass some data with it, data or arguments with it. For instance, let's say when we're navigating from product listing screen to a product detail screen, we probably want to send a product ID as part of data. So it's easier to fetch its details and display its details. Data passing is good because and preferred also because we don't have to have like a global data or share data just so two destinations could access it. It sort of also encapsulates our data. We just need to send it from one destination to another, and nothing outside of that scope has access to it. Previously, before navigation component SafeArgs, we used to use bundles. We would add the arguments to a bundle on one side, then take them out on the other. Navigation component provides a very easier way to pass data called SafeArgs. It's a graded plugin that lets you enter information about the argument you want to pass in the nav graph and automatically generates code for us to deal with bundles. We don't have to write the tedious code to deal with bundles, which is it is done automatically for us. But also, uh, all you all you need to do is declare the arguments you want to pass in the navigation graph. Then it automatically generates code for you to deal with bundles, and it also provides you with type safety, which means that it knows what sort of argument to expect. For instance, let's say in the nav graph, you have declared an argument type Boolean, and you try to pass a string, let's say, it wouldn't compile and throw you an error. In order to implement SafeArgs, we need to update our Gradle dependencies. Adding these dependencies will help create direction classes for any destinations that have actions and for any argument classes that for destinations with arguments. So when declaring the safe arguments in NavGraph, here's how it's done. First, you need to identify the name of the argument, which is what we're going to use to refer to it or to access it. Then the type, which could be a primitive type like an integer, or it could also be a custom parcelable or serialable data class. Then we also have the liberty to define its default value, which is the value when no argument is passed. But this is an optional field. Nav component also gives us the liberty to create nullable arguments, but obviously that's not applicable for primitive data types. So in order to send and retrieve arguments, this is how it's done. You define directions, which is the action you're going to take to send data as part of the method argument. Then on the other side, as in the destination fragment, you retrieve that argument through NavArgs. Pretty simple, right? This is how easy it is to send and retrieve data through Nav component. For the last part of my session, we have deep links. So basically, deep linking is an intent filter system that allows users to directly enter a specific screen from outside the application. So it's basically an ability to access a deeper part of the application without having to clicking through all the fragments in the hierarchy to reach that destination. For instance, let's say you have a login fragment, then you go to home fragment, and then you go to product listing fragment, and then you go to product detail fragment. But if you can directly hit a product detail fragment through deep linking. We need to know that the launcher icon is not the only way to access an Android app. I mean, we have let's say notifications or app widgets or web URIs that take us directly into the specific screen within the app. So there are two types of deep links. One is implicit deep link, which means that they take you to the same static destination within the application. That is, every time you, let's say, click on a shortcut icon, let's say, it would always take you to the same destination. Then we also have explicit deep link, which uses a pending intent to get data present in the deep link to decide what destination to navigate to. So talking about implicit deep linking, it's pretty simple to achieve through navigation component. As you see, I already have a deep link written for the product detail fragment. So one, we need to identify the ID of the deep link. Then we add the action we want to perform when this deep link is clicked. In this case, it's action view. Finally, we have the URI. When we access this URI, it's going to open product detail screen directly for us. You can also see, like it's important to note over here is that we have an argument of type integer, the name product ID. Nav component would automatically map the product ID received as part of the URI with the argument, so long as both of them have the same name. That's about it. Let's wrap up. So we talked in this session, we talked about navigation component in its three parts. Then we talked about how navigation component centralizes navigation related information and how to pass our argument through safe arg, and finally how to achieve deep linking through navigation component. That's about it. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope this session, even though it was very basic, I hope it was useful for you. And that's about it from my side.
Thank you, Mashal. So right now, I am just going through all the comments. And it seems like Sakina has been answering some, but perhaps I will just share because it's meant for navigation component as well. So here's a question. So is there any reference to navigation animation official docs only show slide left and slide out?
I can answer this offline. You can actually also declare your own sort of navigation animation. I can answer this offline. I can just go into my code and paste it over there on how to achieve the animation. Like how can you define it yourself? That sort of thing.
Okay. Let me see. So another question would be, yep. Let's see. Yeah. Development is much interesting and easy.
Yeah, that's very true, actually, honestly. Yeah, especially, I think intents were still relatively easy, but fragment transactions were a bit big pain. So yeah.
Right. Yep. It seems like there's not a lot of questions so far, but for anyone watching, so if you have questions, please do feel free to ask. I'm sure Mashal will be answering some, right, if there are some for navigation component. Let's see. Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mashal. That was a very informative talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I guess we'll go to the next speaker. And our next one will be Wajahat. And Wajahat is a Google developer expert for Android, and he works at Airlift Technologies. So he'll be talking about Jetpack Compose for games and animation. So as usual, if you have any questions, please do ask in the chat. And Wajahat will be answering. I will be answering at the end of this session. Yes. Yep. All right. Thanks, Wajahat, for joining us today.
Hey everyone, how are you? So first of all, I want to thank you that you have taken time from your Saturday and be here and listen to the awesome talks from Mashal and Sakina. And thank you, Didi Kuala Lumpur. Thank you, Ki and Raul, for inviting us and having us here. It's so awesome. It's been a while since I last did talk. So I'm very excited about this one. Although I would have preferred it in person because I'm sort of tired now speaking in front of the screens, but anything for the community, so here I am. So my name is Rajat Karim and I'm Pakistan's Google developer expert in Android. And I have been working on Android for like more than 9 years, 10 years now, and I have also written two worldwide published books. And I have been pretty much active in open source contributions, but for the last 1 year or two, I have been very much less active because I have a toddler baby now in my head. So yeah, baby things and your schedule just wraps up. So today I'm going to talk about Compose. Just last week, we saw the Compose first RC version, recent version, and before the end of July, we will see the first step version of the Compose. So if you have not tried Compose yet, or if you have not worked on it, then this is the best time for you to learn Compose and what can it does for you and how much effect it becomes on the Android application. So so Compose is a modern UI toolkit, sort of declarative UI, as you see in the Flutter or React Native or all the Swift UI and other things. So idea is that Android was exploring this and it's sort of exploded, and now you can use Compose in web, you can use Compose in desktop, Linux, macOS, even wearables. Last week we saw that you can also integrate Compose in the wearables, watches. So yeah, so Compose is now becoming the standard for initially Android development, but at a later stage it was also taking other platforms as well. So the power of Compose is that the things you usually do in Android with traditional XML and layout mechanism is hugely shorter. Like uh, you will be writing much less code, you will be writing very less code, and you have so much power and customization on your hand, which may not be possible in traditional Android development. So when Compose came, it was like the developer preview 9 or 10 when I first tried it, and coming from developer preview 9 to then the alpha, then the beta, and now RC. It's really fantastic game. So now there is the Android Developer Challenge with lots of content and lots of developers experiments around the internet. My main focus was that what it could do for animation and especially games. So I started digging deep into that. Initially it was challenging because there was not much less content around the internet, but slowly things started to build up, and now we have pretty much a lot of stuff on internet regarding animations and yeah. So this section will be mostly focused on animation and how you can add micro animations or tiny interaction in your application in Compose. And I'll be exploring the different ways of animation mechanisms and APIs in Jetpack. So for example, these are some things which are already available on GitHub, and there is a lot of stuff about Compose and everything. You can see in Dino game, this is what I made. And now Ketan Gupta also created some other games like Fruit Ninja and Snack Jam and some other folk started creating Studio Boy, and there is a fantastic repository by Blue Reason about Compose cookbook. It's really, it contains a lot of examples. I will be sharing the link at the end of the slide. So this is our whole agenda about Jetpack Compose, that we have different APIs for the Jetpack Compose, and for the timing constraints, I have removed some. I have not covered those, but once you get hold of these, you can explore those as well. So we let's just start the first one, and then content side. So oftentimes we have seen in the applications like Facebook or social media applications where we have this read more button in the code, and you click it and it expands and you see more content, and it's read less, read more. So this kind of animation is done easily with content size. So you have two sizes, different sizes, and you want to toggle between those, and you want to animate between those. So it's very easy. You have short text and long text, two content sizes, and now you want to keep the storage that whether we are showing it or hiding it. This is just a state, and for the sake of example, I have added clickable toggle that whenever I click on it, it switches the state. So it becomes short or long, and long becomes short. So all you have to do is add this one, animate content. That's it. So now what will it happen? What will happen that this composable expandable text, this will see that what is the current content on this, and what is the new content which is coming up, and it will automatically animate this. So you don't have to do anything. You have to just add the simple animate content side, and you are done. And now you only have to pass what is the current, what is the next, and two different states, and it will automatically change. So that's what Compose is all about: simplicity and power. So not only that, you can actually customize it more. So as you saw that I have added content side in that as well, and this is not limited to text. You can add anything. You can add anything composable. You can add any kind of other composables and other components in that, and Compose will figure it out that what is the initial stage, what is the later stage, and it will automatically animate. So for example, I have added a simple shape for the aspect ratio animation, and like the previous slide, I have added this animate content side, but this time I have added some customization. For example, the first one is that I want linear region with the duration. So if I do 5,000, then it will be a slow animation, and also I can add a listener that when this animation is going to end and what happened, what was the start side and what was the end side. So you are not limited to what control provides. You can actually modify and add your own interaction. So that was simple. And in the content side, when we have two chains, when we are composable with different states, you can just add this modifier and you are done. It will bring some beauty in your application. So now we have animated visibility. So animated visibility is like for the thing where you want to show or hide. Animate content size was about where you want to modify the content of the current composable. But if you have something you want to show hide, for example, there is this floating button, very interesting floating button, which is about when you scroll the list, it hides the label. When you scroll up, it shows the label. So you can see on the bottom. So for example, if you want to create this one, we first we add opt-in experimental animation API because this is experimental, and then we add a floating button with row. In that we have icon and text. So this is icon and this is text. So all you have to do is this animate video. So instead of placing text directly inside the row, I wrap this inside the animated visibility. This will tell Compose that whatever is inside animated visibility may become available for visibility or it may hide. So now how we define that? We define by passing the value and true false that whether we want to show this or not. But for the sake of example, I have triggered the expanded visibility, expanded value on click. So you could do this on a scroll or some other scenario your application needs, and all you have to do is pass a variable that whether you want to show this or hide it, and that's it. So uh, now whenever this is true, this will animate, and whenever this is false, this will automatically animate. This will not just pop up, this will actually animate. And like the previous example, we can actually you know modify the behavior of animation. So inside the animated visibility, we have parameters like intertransition. So I have set it like sliding horizontally, and I've said that okay, this is initial offset x is 300, so this will come from 300, and I have also added a screen with a 2000 duration. So you can see this example. Whenever I press the button, inter light text comes from the 300 offset and slides in horizontal. Similarly, I have offset or I have exit transition. So for example, in the lower example, we see that we have both default enter and exit animation, and on the top we have default animation. So you can actually modify more, and you can add your own specifications and twins and easings and durations and whatever not, and this will bring more customization. So like that. So, for example, I created this simple bottom navigation menu using this animated widget. So every button, every menu option have text and not. So I only set the true whichever is selected, and all the other becomes false. So it automatically animates at the same time and looks beautiful. And on the other side, we have this example from the Android source code. This is about how you can add animated visibility in the list. So it's very interesting. So yeah, that was animated video. So you saw that how you can actually animate the content changes and how you can animate the content visibility. But what about those extra animations you want to do, which may not be either content size or visibility, which may be some different things. So for that we have animate star step. So previously it was the animate method, but now it's deprecated, and now we have bunch of these methods like animate DP, animate color, animate float, animate int, and lots of stuff. So these are sort of fire and forget animation. So you just start it and let it go. So you are not interested in when the animation ends, or you are not interested in tracking it, you are not interested in pausing it or stopping it or something like that. You just let it go, okay, go ahead and do it. So for example, we have this animation that whenever you will select button, it changes its colors and changes its size. So for that, we have initially a button with a text like before, and now I am maintaining the state between what was the state of the button. So uh, again, for example, I have toggled it on a click. Now the real action happens. So I have color, so I do instead of defining wall color equal to color blue, I just simply use animate color as its delegate, and I say that when the button is enabled, make it blue or green, otherwise green. So this will not only keep green and blue, this will keep the transition between green and blue. So it keeps the value of all the possible keys between green and blue, and it will give to the compose on every millisecond or iteration, and it will look like that you are animating the color. Similarly, I have height and width. So I say okay, 40, 60, and 150, 300, and these are the DPs. So we have now all kind of ranges from 40 to 60 and 150 to 300, and we don't have any loops or something like that. And all I have to do is assign the inside directly. Like in the button, I usually do button default or button colors. We say color dot blue, but instead I say color. This is from animate color state, and similarly height and width. So now this button will automatically pick all the value from color, height, and width and slowly show you the animation instead of just popping up from the big button to small button. So it's easy like that. You don't have to do any extra things. If you were into the traditional Android XML scenario, you will have to write transitions, and you will have to hit them, and yeah, a bunch of methods on how you can start and how you can end. But no, we have only just assigned value that whatever value you need. That's it. So similarly, I can do more with this, and not only one button, I can do two buttons. So we have a toggle which tells us that whether male is selected or female is selected. I think this is clickable. And now I have done the image size. So we have row with two images, both images, and I have defined height and width based on that. So for example, we have preferred size and image details again. So when this is female, make it 100, and when this is male, make it 200. Similarly, not only the height and width, I only can do border. So I say, okay, make it border from 0 to 4. And I am also doing color of the border from uh, transparent to red. So you can see that whichever is selected, it also brings the, border as well. So this was the female part, and I can only I should add these similar lines in male with flip value. So once I did it, both transitions run at same time and look like the one is pushing the other one, but both transitions are running at the same time with same duration. So we have very good male-female selector over. So very fantastic. So we have, for example, I created this another menu with animated star. So all buttons are hidden and are at the center. So whenever we click on the menu, all the buttons go around the center button based on the radius and distance and angles of that. So all I do is animate star as state and translate their x and y position. And voila. So similarly, in the compose cookbook by Root Weekend, we have the fantastic album cover animation. We are very interesting. We use the similar concept of animated star state method. So it's really fantastic. Okay, so now we have animatable. So as I told you that this was about fire and forget. Whatever if I want to animate something repeat again over and over again, and I want to modify some behavior or something. So let's see how we can do that. So we have this heartbeat. It's a very simple example of how we can actually animate. So we have animate scale, animate color, and remember I'm not using any by or something, animate color scale or something. I remember, and I have a class animatable in which I will pass initial value. So initial value is 1 and initial color is red. Now I have launch effect. The launch effect is sort of coroutine scope, composable. It will only be alive when this composable is in the life cycle, and when this gets out of stream, then this composable, this scope will automatically cancel all the existing animation which may be running inside this effect. So I pass this animate scale and animate color inside that, and then I define that what it needs to do when this animation effectively starts. So I say that whenever this whenever this coroutine scope starts, just animate 2F, and this is the infinite repeatable transition of duration 300 and delay 1000. So 300 animation, then 1 second delay, then 300 animation. And I also set the reverse. This GIF does not project reverse, but in the reverse you have a heartbeat up and down, up and down, up and down, not snapping like in this picture. So color is like also like that. And launch effect was about the purpose of it. Whenever this composable comes in the light, just start animation. If I want to start this animation on some sort of click, then I will avoid launch effect, and I will add this mode on the click listener and just start animation. And finally, for that, I have to only assign these values and make scale and make color just like normal. So, yeah, it's like that. Repeated animation. It's a canvas animation, it's very easy animation. So now, as we discussed about, as we mentioned the canvas, let's see that what canvas is. So canvas is a simple composable which just gives us a space drop. So it's a spacer, and it calls a modifier draw behind and lets us draw whatever you want to do. So how what you can do with this? Okay, we have some methods already, like draw rectangle, draw over line, edges, and paths and circles and all that. Then if I want to create my own shape, or if I want to create something my own, instead of using composable, I cannot call a composable inside the canvas draw behind. I need to create an extension function from draw scope dot. So I define my all functions like this, and now I can call the method inside the canvas very easy. So we have a simple example of here. that we have a canvas with full size, and now I draw three circles, like a red circle, green circle, and blue circle, and voila, we have this very interesting shape here. We can do a lot of stuff with it. Actually, we have a lot of power, so much power that we can create whole games in the canvas with just business logic and design mechanism, just like OpenGL or some rendering can do. So, for example, we can use the animatable on canvas. For example, we have animation position, and we tell that its initial value is 0, and its last value is 500, and it's infinite, and it does not support reverse mechanism. So whenever the anti-animation comes to the original position without any animation. So now I have a canvas with 100 dp, and in the on-draw mechanism I say that let's draw that rectangle. But this will not translate, this will not animate it. For the animation in canvas, I need to use transform. So we have rotation, we have scale, we have translation. So in that case, in this case, I want to use the translate mechanism, and now I only need to pass the position, and that position I'm picking from animator. So now this canvas will draw this rectangle on every iteration slowly, and looks like that we are animating. So, and using this same mechanism, I actually managed to create this whole clone dinosaur game, and there are a bunch of other fantastic examples by Eric Lockwood, who actually tried to copy the animation from Beat and Drums and made it in the convert, and it was really fantastic. So there are a bunch of other games like Tetris or like Snake, like Food Ninja and 2048. These games are already available on GitHub and Imagine Compose, so you can get a really great idea about what you can do with Canvas and Compose. So finally, we have transition. So far we saw the composable with small animation or individual animation. But what if we want to actually create a collaboration? We want to actually create multiple things, interact with each other, and depend on each other. And that's where we utilize the transition. The transitions are like, okay, I want to create a floating and exploding one. Whenever I click on it, it explodes and replaces the whole screen. So let's create that example with transition and see how it comes. So initially we have a threshold, and inside that we have a floating action button. I have defined a function exploding that button. We will see that what this method does. So this exploding fab button actually defines the composable. We will see how we can animate. So for that we need two states. One is normal and one is exploded. You can add more states, and you can create more complex animations with it. So now I create a state of size, and then I just create this fab transition variable. So this transition variable is our website there, just like this class. And I have this method update transition from composable, and I need to create the value. I need to pass the value inside. So now this transition will allow us to do a lot of things with this state, and we can use this state inside our component. So let's see. So first thing I do is that fat transition dot animate float. I say that is my color size. So I define two states. When this is normal, let's make the size of 80. When this is exploded, let's make the size of 5,000. Similarly, I do similar for animate color, and I say that when this is normal, let's make it secondary, and when this is exploded, make it primary color. And now I have destination, like what is happening, what I need at the start, what I need at end. For us, start is normal and end is exploded. These are the states. Now I need to define actual transition. So these are the steps from previous slides, like as you defined. And inside the floating button, we have an icon, and I'm triggering these tests from normal exploded and click that part setup example, and we have size inside past and modify the size website value, and color is the background color of the data. So we have assigned this value, and now when I run it, it will pull up. We have a button, but I need to define how actually I need to animate, you know, more power. So as we did, just like in the last example, we created this fat transition that can upload. I actually can pass more things inside this project. So we had this one like previously, original, but we can add now transition back, and in that I can actually control the whole animation scenario myself based on my requirement. So I say that transition should be when normal is transition is loaded, let's make it a keyframe thing and define the duration of 1000, and now I'm telling that it should be 0 at 80, and when 35 it should be 200. So it's like duration. So when this animation starts, it's at 0, and when this animation ends, it's 1000 milliseconds. So I'm telling that at the start it should be 0, and at 200 it should be 35. So you see that I'm decreasing the size at first, and then suddenly I am increasing the size. The one effect we saw that button is loading like that. So first it decreased, then suddenly explode. So in the other scenario, I just added a slow in engine, fast out slow in engine, and I said that it should be 1,000. So you see that you can add more stuff. Like if you have multiple states, not only normal and exploded, then you can actually define the whole behavior that when this is coming from state 1 to state 2, then do this. When this is coming from state 2 to state 3, do this. And you have more power over the transition. So you can see that button is first coming down and then coming up. And, I can also modify with back animation and improve it as well. So uh, we have some bunch of examples like we have in the tutorial is this very fantastic nice button with fabric and multiple components like box and like icon and text, and these are all collaborating with each other. Similarly, I had a library with these UI tried to create this and compose, and it was very interesting. It was very fantastic and easy. And exploring button we saw there is an article by Joe Burt on that as well, so you can read it in more detail. So Jetpack Component also gives you an animation inspector inside the Android Studio to see that how your animation actually works. So you can see that this is the initial step and this is the end step, and you can slowly drag drop and preview the whole animation inside that and see that what kind of values are being assigned. So I say that how width getting changed, how bounded corner is getting changed, and this will give you the all values on each front. So I can debug it with more confidence, and I can improve my animation as well. So now with all of these lots of options, the question is that good animation use when. So this is the graph by Android on their official website. It explains that how you can decide that what animation is right. So we have a chart. If you want to change the content in the layout, then obviously you have two kinds. One is that whether that content change is about visibility, showing, hiding, or whether it's just content change and everything is visible. If it's a content change, obviously you want to use animate content size, and if it's about visibility, then just put it animated visibility. And if this is about not any content change, then this is about screen transition, like from one screen to other screen, then you have crossfade. I have not covered crossfade in this, but you will get a better idea when you search about it. So this is about just like we do left and left right. So cross-check is like where you check the whole composable and replace it with another one. So if you have not content change in layout and it's state-based and happens during composition, like it's something which happens when composable comes alive, and then you have to say, okay, is animation infinite? Okay, then you remember it infinite transition. If it is multiple different composables animating at the same time, then just go ahead and create a transition and control each one. Okay. But no, if this is not about multiple effects, this is about one, and you want to control it more deeply, then go ahead and use it animation. And if you don't need control and you just want to fire and forget, just use the animation state and good to go. So yeah, this may sound confusing as some at the start, but as you do more stuff with your applications and animation API, you will get a better idea about how you can do more optimal and performant animation. So Compose gives us a lot of confidence and flexibility and customization in controlling our animation, which in our traditional Android development either are very complex or very lengthy code or very not possible. So, yeah. So these are some resources. There are very fantastic pathways. One is also on full compose animation pathway, so that will be a good point. So go ahead and explore this. And Alex Lockwood's animations are in video form, so there are a bunch of animations and also other game video for it. Joe Buck is writing a book about Jetpack Compose, so it has a lot of stuff about on his website. And group reaching example is about Compose Cookbook. Leland Richardson is actually the team member in the official Google Compose team. He usually does a weekly live stream on his Twitch where you know deep dive into Compose and sometimes he creates examples, sometimes he explains Compose and what is happening inside Compose. And so it's very helpful. Vinay Gabar created a repository which was used to create, references. Like if I need a recycler view in my Compose, what would I choose? So it is a sort of dictionary between old terminology and new terminology, and so very good. So thank you for listening. The whole code is available on Android 20, and please follow me on Twitter. And I'd like to let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Rajahat. Thank you for your talk. Yep, Jetpack Compose is very interesting. There's a lot of things you can do. So I'm looking through the comments, and it doesn't seem like there's any questions. So if you do have any questions, perhaps you can, let me just share Rajahat's slides again. So you can contact him by Rajahat on Twitter if you want to talk about Jetpack Compose. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Rajahat. Thank you so much. Okay. So yep. So that was Wajahat. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. So Wajahat will be our last speaker. So yep. Thanks for joining us. I will be having our second half of the session next week, and it will be at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Next Saturday. This will be GMT 8, so that's Malaysia time. Right, and we'll be having 3 speakers as well. One ML, and another
One
session
on-
will be, sorry?
One on Flutter and then the other one on web.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yep, bad memory. Thank you, Lai Fong. Yep.
Nice.
So if you have our friends at our friends at Georgetown will also be having a session at the same time, which is But yeah, it's okay. Luckily, online events are streamed, so you can always tune back. So if you are interested in GDG Georgetown's talk session as well, I'll be sharing the links in the comments in a bit for these two events. Yep. So that's basically it. Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. And yeah, so our stream should be online. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.